The opinions expressed in this podcast are those of the host and guests and don't necessarily reflect the views of WOWT.
I am really looking forward to this conversation. This conversation that goes into a long-held belief of mine that very few people are really good or really bad. Life is very much more complicated than that, and we're going to be getting into that. That involves the Catholic Church, it involves the judicial system and prison. Yeah, get to that in a second here. But before I do that, I want to just remind you and ask you to make sure that you subscribe to the Becca's Talking YouTube channel and like us on Facebook, the Becca's Talking Facebook page, and then make sure you join us every Tuesday when we have a brand new podcast coming up with interesting people from the region, from the Omaha, Council Bluffs area. And today's no exception. My guest is Mary Kay Leatherman. She has written a book called Her Religious Conviction. Her Religious Conviction. Now, that title has two different meanings. It's
yes.
Because this is a story about Sister Barbara Markey, who, if you've been in Omaha a long time, you may recall the story. What year was this? 2008. 2008.
Yeah.
A story about a nun who wound up in trouble with the law and spent time in prison. And this is sort of like the untold story, right? Because this nun, Sister Markey, was your aunt.
Yes, my mother's sister.
Okay, so let's talk about this. First of all, tell me about your mother's sister. Who was she?
Okay, so thanks for having me today. Sister Barbara Markey, who started out as Sister Mary John, we knew her as Sister John, was this amazing force in our life. And as children growing up, we would go visit the Notre Dame nuns, and we'd pretend to be nuns and with Czechoslovakian accents. But she was the energy and a force that she was brilliant. She was a genius, and she was passionate, beyond passionate about family. And so her own family, and then as she founded the Family Life Office in Omaha, about helping families starting right at the marriage and all of that.
So,
yes.
And again, I was talking before, and I'm a lapsed Catholic. I had 10 years of parochial school. I don't really follow the Catholic religion that much anymore, but at the same time, I had that foundation in the Catholic faith.
Right.
And as I recall, when Catholic couples get married, they have to go and meet with the priest, and they go through all of this. I don't know, is it training before they get married? How does that all work?
Okay, there's an inventory, and this is what she and several counselors published back in they used a premarital inventory before, and they developed it and took it to a different level. But basically saying, you don't have to pass, this is not a test. It is, if we have all of these questions and you both answer them about home life, about sex life, about raising children, are you on the same page? And if not, do you want to talk about that? And it's presently, that's the beauty of focus is still here today, and it is in 30 countries around the world, 8,000 organizations, not just the Catholic Church, saying, wow, this is a great instrument for people getting ready to go into marriage. And you've read the book, so there was the one question where she had two lawyers who were getting married. One wanted kids, one didn't. And that was a pretty big deal. And so they decided not to get married, but it was something that it was like had them talk about it, right? And what that would look like.
So FOCUS stands for what?
It stands for Facilitating Open Couples Communication, research and studying. Okay. So it's understanding study. And so what they do is, like back in the day, it was the same questions. Well, then they developed it for couples who cohabitated before. And then today they have programs for couples who are both in the medical world, like my daughter and her husband both. If they have a bad day, it's not the same bad day as I have. They might have someone die in front of them. So they have, they've said there are all different kinds of marriages that we need to talk about and help and reach.
So this was basically, was this being done prior to her creating FOCUS? Did she just expand on another policy, or did she create this out of thin air?
Well, there was a premarital inventory that these ladies took to a different level. And then she on her own went around the world promoting it. It's copyrighted. They have, FOCUS is then refocus for, couples later, building a bridge as they get older in their marriage. So they just explore and research all avenues of marriage. And It's been around since probably, I know they had inventories in the 70s, and then she took it in the 80s, and it was really her promoting it that really took it.
That's what I found so interesting about this, is that, I said, basic Catholic background. In my day, I was told the nuns took a vow of poverty, right? The nuns had no cash
Right.
whatsoever. However, Sister Barbara Markey, taking this focus to all these different parishes around the world, she was hauling in some big bucks, wasn't she?
Absolutely. She raised millions of dollars for the archdiocese, which was exciting for her because that meant she could do all these different programs and they could keep growing. Actually recognized across the country as one of the only family life offices that made money. So many came and watched and observed what she was doing to help grow these programs. To your question about, as a nun taking a vow of poverty, she was not your traditional nun. Okay. And so I think in many ways that offended people, and that she's like, she was a psychologist, right? She made a lot of money for her community and for the archdiocese. She counseled people. She worked with programs for single parents, all different things that she did, abused wives. She had all kinds of programs. And then beyond that, so she's juggling these three things. It was just helping each other. It grew and grew. And because of that, she was on Good Morning Australia, down in Australia. She worked in that archdiocese. She had people around the world that would have her come stay with them and do workshops. And while she was doing a workshop for family life, she'd also say, "Can I do focus?" And so she had endless, she was in Brazil, she was in Singapore, endless energy. I remember she celebrated with us when she hit her 50th state, and this had to have been in the late 80s, early 90s. So it was her energy that she's doing things that traditional nuns don't do.
And that didn't always bode well with the more traditional Catholics, right?
Right. Older Catholics, people in the community, people in the church. Yes.
Now, we talked about the money that she made, and you say that to her community. When you say community, you mean the Sisters of Notre Dame. That's what you refer to as her community, right?
Notre Dame.
So she would go and donate this money. And as I recall from reading the book, there was she gave the sisters $300,000. Is that what, or at least from gambling expenses, right? From gambling winnings.
When she would go, and I think we need to bring it to like the fact that we love the Notre Dame community. We grew up with them. So many amazing women. I think the disconnect was when, and to say a nun going to a casino with my mom and dad, they'd go to dinner, and that's one tiny piece of the story of what she did and how many people she helped, did not sit well. And yet she never stole money from the church. That's where it.
But that's what she was charged with, right?
Right.
Okay, so in the meantime, while she's doing all this good for families and all that, would you say that she was addicted to gambling? I mean, does she have a gambling problem?
I would say her behavior was one that she had more endless energy, and she would go and do many things, and she was obsessed with her programs. Was there, when she sat to relax, I can't speak to it, but what I can say is she said endlessly, "Let me defend myself." And that's where the story goes beyond that. Let me show you where the money is. Let me show you that the money that went to my community, the money that came there, it was all her wanting to defend herself that she was stopped. Right. And I think the toxic cocktail of what I would say is her passion for her programs, her wanting to hold it all on herself. Like she definitely wanted to say, "I don't want my family to have to deal with this legal stuff." All of that. And us being naive. And that's a big part of the story, is our family not having a lot of knowledge of the legal world when she was told, "Let's have you plead guilty," which we're like, why? She didn't want a circus. She didn't want it. It was becoming what she felt was hard on the family. No idea that she would go to prison. That they assumed that she would get parole. And again, I can't stress, you have to read the book to understand all the nuances of the situation.
Yeah, we're not getting into everything, because I will say this, I'm just giving the overview of the book.
Right.
The book, of course, is called Her Religious Conviction. Right. And it goes into, like I said, the large part about your whole family, the upbringing and all of that, her upbringing, your mom and everything. When you say that she wanted to defend herself but was stopped, who stopped her?
Well, So first of all, need to know that the people that step forward, and we call them the Lincoln lawyers, but they actually have given the blessing to say you can use our name. It's Steve Barry, John Barry's father, is married to a woman who was once a novice to become a nun and was a dear friend of Sister Barbara's. And so that team stepped forward, shouldered mostly by him, to say, we will defend you. And I met with them recently in May, talking about the book and sharing stories about what an incredibly faith-filled woman she was, intelligent woman, just energy. All of the lawyers on the Lincoln lawyer team, they enjoyed and felt like it was unfortunate that she went to prison. But when we got to the point where we moved to the hearing to Omaha, it was suggested that she just plead guilty. It's called an Alford plea. And again, never knew what an Alford plea was my entire life. Now, unfortunately, I do know. And had we known more of all that was going on, we would have encouraged her to defend herself, right? And so that was where her doing that was supposed to just make it kind of go away, that she would be on probation. The family wouldn't have to keep seeing, her picture on the front of the World Herald as if she were this awful person. And so that was her decision. And again, there's more nuances to that story too, why she's agreed to do that.
Yeah. Now, you say that you thought that she would just get probation.
That's what they had.
Yeah, because it was a first offense, right? Mm-hmm. She'd done a lot of good things in the community.
Right.
She was not at risk of. I assume that she wasn't having access to the money that they accused her of embezzling, so she had no more access to that money. Why then do you think they threw the book at her? Did he ever get any indication as to anything from the judge or the church or prosecution as to why she didn't get probation?
I don't know exactly. And again, I think that's part of the story, is where we sat quietly and said, we'll be quiet because they're taking care of it. And you know what? Beyond that, the why, which we'll never know. And there's that part in the book where I talk about, the joke of the priest and the judge walk into a bar, and pretty soon there's the media and there's there's all these people that it wasn't funny anymore. And we couldn't just point a finger at any of them and say, we feel better. And it was having to forgive that whole situation, to say she died 4 years ago, right? And she wanted to stay with her community. And so the book was actually, and that's what I'd love to talk about, is the book was written when she was in prison, to say, wow, there's just another side to this story. And when I presented it to her after she was out of prison in 2010, she said, I just can't have this. She was the one who said, someday there's going to have to be a book about this, because you just can't make it up, right? And so when I presented her with the book, she said, it is going to have to wait because I want to live with my community. So she died the day before Easter in 2021. And that's a scene in the book at her funeral where I realized that many people in our family were still struggling with the situation. And I pulled the book out, and my husband, who is the big part of the story, said, blow off the anger and the frustration and the confusion and make it about how amazing she was. And so I went on this journey the last 4 years, interviewing all these people who worked with her in different capacities, who were like, I'm so glad you're doing this, celebrating her. And her whole life was about, you can't have joy unless you have suffering. You can't have light unless you have darkness. You can't tell the story of Sister Barbara Markey without, saying how wonderful she was, without saying this dark side of what happened. And however you want to look at that and analyze it, she still forgave those people and had amazing grace about the situation.
You say she wanted to defend herself and everything, but she did. I mean, did she plead her innocence in all of this, or did she indeed, take money that perhaps she shouldn't have taken?
She did not steal any money from the church. She did not. And because she's in a situation of flying and all the things that she did, what she did is when she tried to defend herself initially, it was hard for her to get a hold of accounts. And the whole process just seemed like it was going to be difficult. That's when she said, an Alford plea says you plead guilty even though you're not pleading guilty.
Right.
All right. And so what she, to the end, said, there's another side to this story,
So it was just a matter of, in her mind at least, bad bookkeeping?
Yes.
Okay.
And that's because the business grew with 3 different facets, her counseling, the Family Life Office and Focus at an amazing speed. And she was, that to a certain degree, that probably would be more than anything.
She wouldn't be the first person to have a great idea for business and then not be able to handle the business part of it. I mean, that happens all the time in the commercial world, and somebody that might be very good at the product may not be so good with the bookkeeping.
Well, and prior to all of the accusations, for years, they and I don't know who these people are, but I call them the Blurry Club in the book, because if I was standing in the line at the bank next to anybody who was in the legal world and the part of the archdiocese that wanted control of her programs, I wouldn't know who they are. So all I know is she kept saying they wanted control of her program, Focus, and she knew if she did that, many of her own programs would go away. And she even admitted, and that's in the book too, that she probably should have just given in to that, but she wanted so badly to protect that her Family Life Office was everything. It was all of her working with families that were broken and helping them to work together. She was passionate about it, and so for her it was she admitted that she probably should have just let go, and then it turned into the accusations.
You and I were talking a little bit before the podcast, and you mentioned that in the Catholic Church, if a priest gets into trouble, whether it be alcoholism, sexual offense, something along those lines, they tend to give them counseling and then just send them away, right? Mm-hmm. To another parish or something. Mm-hmm. Have the problem go away. Why didn't your aunt, why didn't Sister Marky get that same sort of benefit?
I think, again, back to she wasn't the traditional nun. She was in a position of leadership. And I think it needs to be mentioned that she became that leader because the Archbishop Sheehan said, you're going to be the head of the Family Life Office at a time when women weren't in charge of things. Mm-hmm. She had always been singled out in her community as visionary. She was somebody who was strategic, and he said, I want you for this job, but understand that all your excitement and everything you want to do, I can only give you this much, and beyond that, you're going to have to figure it out. And she did. And so she was probably received by, I don't know, some people as kind of, I don't know, the non-traditional nun is the best way I can say it.
Right.
And so she was a woman, and she didn't act like a woman. She acted like a leader or a director and all of that. And I think, she would be the first to say she made mistakes, but she didn't steal money from the church.
What kind of mistake did she make then?
Just not giving into the program, probably not. And, there was one of the people who worked with her that probably should not have been working for her. Just some decisions she made. And again, beyond all of these little things, again, everything is in the book and in explaining it. But, the fact that she did all she did as a leader and then went to prison, to York, to the prison system, which was harsh, and she never complained, and she forgave the people as we sat there saying, this is awful, this is terrible, and we're angry at the Catholic Church and your community, and she'd say, well, this is not the community, this is not the Catholic Church, these are some people who happen to not be happy with me, to separate that.
So she, like I said, she wanted to be part of her community.
She loved her community.
But at the same time, she wanted her story to be told, but don't tell her while she was alive. Is that pretty much, I mean, it seems
well, she wasn't allowed to tell her story while she was alive. Her community was part of...
Then why did she want to be a part of that community then? If the community was not going to support her in telling her story, what was it that made her...
It's a great question, and I'll tell you what it felt like. If you had a family member, if you had a brother who was in it, or a sister in an abusive situation and they wanted to stay in it, it was something that she loved being a nun and something she truly wanted to end her life with, being a Notre Dame nun. Mm-hmm. And so we couldn't do that until after she died. And she just said it, and it's funny because of the very last page of the book, her spiritual advisor is a Jesuit priest who he asked me, he said, I'm interviewing him saying, would you allow me to be a part of this story, Father Gillick? And he said, yes, I just have a question. Why are you telling this story? And I thought, gosh, what a great question. Because why don't you just move on, And I think because when I first wrote the book, and I had It was about what was going on. And I'm glad I wrote it then, and I'm glad I didn't publish it then, just to say, because there was a lot of, today I probably wouldn't have remembered all the details, but that are important to sharing the story. But it was a sadness and anger that is no longer here, but a story that says, after she died, let's do this a different way. Let's say, you're not going to believe it if I tell you about this little girl who took an IQ test in ninth grade, and mom says, you know what? They lived in Denver. You're getting C's because you're not, we need to have you somewhere. We're going to send you to Notre Dame Academy with my mother. And who would have guessed that my mother would leave and get married and have 4 little girls and love family? And that Sister Barbara say, I'm going to stay here and make family also my focus.
Okay, so I mean, the story. This is all true. I mean, it's a true story that involves religion, involves the criminal system. It involves so many different family. It involves so many different aspects of it, which I found fascinating in reading the book. And we're not going to tell you how it all ends. She dies at the end. Okay, that much I'll tell you. But there's a lot of other stuff.
And she goes to prison. All right.
Yeah, because you start the book out basically talking about you're visiting her in prison.
That's not the punchline. The punchline is just the whole journey.
One thing I found interesting though in reading the book is that although you don't mention a lot of people's names.
Right.
In other words, everybody that is involved in this has a pseudonym.
Yes, they do.
Why?
And actually afterwards saying, go ahead and use our name. But I felt the story the focus is Sister Barbara Markey, amazing woman. But I say the Lincoln lawyers, the Omaha lawyer, I have different names for the nuns. I'm
sure you do. I'm sure you do.
I'm not calling out anyone. It is for our family, for anyone who says, hey, faith is hard. Try it going through this experience, for her, what she did, and still being faith-filled. That's what the story is about. And it is, in the end, and my husband was my biggest cheerleader, because I swear, Tom, I quit this like 12 times. I'm like, this, it was heavy, it was hard, and why am I doing this? And, are people going to be mad? And at the end, it's like you said, at this point, people can be mad. They were mad then. We were sad. At this point, it's not about how you feel. It's this story of probably one of the most incredible people I've ever known.
When I think about this book, and you mentioned family numerous times in this conversation, you put this book out now, and you're out promoting it, and you're selling the book, selling the story. While you're doing this, you're bringing up a lot of old dirt, things that the family had put aside. Okay, I mean, why did you actually put this out? Why not just let sleeping dogs lie and just, and has there been any backlash from other family members that are upset with you for writing this book?
Okay, great question, and it's like a million things I could say. The family is very supportive. The family wanted this out. We were the Omaha family, and we sat there and lived in the heat of it. Whereas, like you said, you don't remember much. You remember something. It was very present in our lives, and it felt heavy. Our family, I call them the Colorado cousins, but it's all my relatives across the country that started in Colorado. They couldn't help. They didn't know what to do when they came to her funeral. So this is an answer to your question, because it was in a box for almost 15 years, right? And when she said, no, I can't have this, very hard for me to do, tie it in a bow, put it away, probably the biggest blessing of my life, because when I pulled it out, I'm like, oh, got to do this a little differently now. It was the day of her funeral when all of the Colorado cousins and family came, and it was at the end of COVID, and if Sister Barbara Markey had died in her heyday, there would have been people from all over the country and possibly the world at her funeral. But because of COVID, because of this long story, it was a smaller funeral. We're at the cemetery, and my cousins were very angry at the nuns. And I thought, we just have moved on, but they're still angry, and they don't know the story, And so, to your point, the family's happy. I haven't received any backlash, and I assume some people might not be happy about it. Family's so happy about it. But what I'm surprised about is that the family, calls. I'm laughing, I'm crying. This is so her. People I don't even know, who didn't even know Sister Barbara, are commenting like, wow, what a story and what an amazing woman. And when you write a book, I always have like a team of like 12 readers. And usually my sister, obviously she'll say, oh, this is amazing, because that's your sister. But, I would think of people. I knew someone who had fallen out of the church a little bit and had some situations where she knew the Catholic Church and its beauty, but also knew it has its own issues too. I said, would you be a reader? Kathy, would you be a reader? Never met Sister Barbara. Read the book and said, I think about her all the time. And I wish I had a Sister Barbara in my life who could guide me in my marriage, who would, be funny in a situation that was dark. Her spirit and her energy, I think, comes through in the book. I don't know how it was for you, but she was just a different, there are very few people that are like her, And so I think, again, some people might not be happy, but I don't think anything said it wasn't said before.
What would you say to somebody who, because I sort of know, being in the media all these years, sort of have an idea of how this works.
Yeah.
Your aunt's in the front page of the World Herald story, nun embezzled hundreds of thousands of dollars from the church, and, now going to York and going to prison, all that. So just from that information, the average person thought, boy, your aunt was a real scumbag, right?
Right.
I mean,
right.
Yeah. And that. So what would you say to somebody that, like with this book, saying that, you're just trying to whitewash the story?
Well, first of all, if someone said it before, I'd say read the book. And I do think in reading the book, you realize we're not making it sound like there weren't problems or issues, but it's like you have to understand from the beginning to the end how it got to where it was. I don't think anyone reading the book would ever see her as a scumbag. I don't know. I think they'd say, well, maybe that's how you see it, but it's actually factual.
Talking about the book, more along the lines of people that read the newspaper articles back in the day, that sort of a thing, you say innocent until proven guilty, but in this world, basically, when it makes the news, you're guilty till proven innocent in the public opinion, in many public opinion. Yeah.
Well, and to your point, what kept me going is the letters to the editor, people who didn't know her saying, what's going on here? Mm-hmm. Those voices said this. I felt compelled to write something to the World Herald. I don't even know who this nun is, but what's going on here? And Jonathan Turley is actually a national legal consultant, and he writes for CNN, MSNBC, Fox. He's called in to talk about the legal world in those worlds. He wrote an article about Sister Barbara, and he said, what's going on? What is this whole story? And it's basically, I emailed him and I stumbled upon it towards the last round of editing. And I'm like, I've got to put this in here. And I emailed him on his website, and he answered right away. I said, can I use your article? And he said, sure. And it was like, if on a national level, someone saw the juicy, gambling nun steals money, it's a story. It's a hot story. And he read into it. He read the story. He read the articles, and he wrote something saying, something wasn't quite right. And so we're not saying the newspaper wasn't correct. There's just some things that were slanted in a way that maybe there's another side to the story.
Yeah.
That's all. And I think anyone, again, most people who read it said, wow, not, and maybe they didn't even hear about her, but the people who had remembered kind of the situation saying, I didn't know your family was going through it. We were very hush hush. It's just, to me, her life was a beautiful story.
After spending time in prison and everything, and she gets back into the community, was she bitter at all? I mean, did she just put this behind her and start being the singing nun and just happy sister? I mean, what was she like after she got out of prison?
Oh gosh, well, she went to prison when she was 73 years old, so I think that's a piece that you need to understand. It aged her to go through prison. Her health wasn't the best. That she lived with one of the people in the community. I do say her name, Sister Dorothy, was an amazing supporter and stood by her throughout all of that. She forgave them. And I can't say that was the same for all of us yet. And it was through her death, through really pulling the story out, interviewing, saying, let's move on. But you need to see the life of this woman. I think that the least we can do she did so much for so many people.
The book is called Her Religious Conviction. And sort of what I started this whole thing off, in my experience in life, very few people are totally good or totally bad. And, you know, I mean, there are some really bad people. And, you know, but how about even Mother Teresa had a dark side, you know? So the book is fascinating. And a lot more to the story. Mary Kay Leatherman, I thank you for joining, talking about this.
Follow me on MK Leatherman on Facebook and on Instagram. That would be great.
And I assume the book is available on Amazon, all the bookstores, right?
Yep. Yeah. Bookworm, and soon to be in audio. And on my website. So
wonderful. And make sure you join us every Tuesday, a brand new podcast. And by the way, you know, winter months are coming, you know, and nice you get maybe kind of hibernating. It might be nice to go to the YouTube channel and then just sort of get on down that rabbit hole of all the different conversations we've had, because a little bit of everything with these podcasts. So you'll find something that you'll find fascinating. Hope you enjoyed this one. Till next time, take care and bye, y'all.